awesome show today. It's February and it is the season of love. It is the season of hearts and flowers and really just a time to appreciate your significant other. So, this podcast is just absolutely about that. Today, we're going to talk to Talaat and Tai from the His and Her Money Show. Yep, we're talking green, we're talking money today, and we're talking couples. So if you are interested in getting some cutting edge tips on how to deal with your honey and your money, stay tuned. Okay, well, welcome to the Savvy Young Professional. How are y'all doing today?
We're great.
Doing great.
Doing great. So I'm so glad to have you on the show. This, as we talked about a little bit before we started recording, this is a very relevant topic. I'm a big listener of your show, and I think that this is something that people are really going to be able to sink their teeth in because everybody wants to know about money. So I got the
Absolutely.
experts here today with me. I'm going to go ahead and roll into the first question, and that pretty much is how about you guys just give me a little bit of a background of your story and how you got to the point of deciding to get to podcasting and talking about money?
Well, our story is, I don't know if it's unique or not, but it's very different than the norm because Ty and I are very different when it comes to how we viewed money at the beginning of our marriage. I was deep in debt, had low credit score, terrible spending habits, and Ty had a great credit score. She was no debt and she was great with money. I mean, she even had a degree in money and was working in financial services. So whenever you put a spender and a saver together in marriage, you are bound to have some different challenges and obstacles to overcome when it comes to personal finance. And so that's really how our foundation was laid, was really trying to navigate our differences when it came to personal finance. And it was some tough times, some tough conversations, and some tough battles that we fought to get to where we are now. And really, the lessons that we learned along the way are what we kind of share on our website, His and Her Money, and how we got to this point. Because I tell you, it was tough for both parties involved because we were not only just merging together with each other financially, but we were brand new husband and wife. So we're learning how to be husband and wife, learning how to be married. And the money topic, I mean, that's one that can make or break a marriage. And so we really had to buckle down and figure this thing out in order to get on the same page financially, because that's a big, big part of surviving in your marriage is getting on the same page.
Wow. And I would imagine that that would be true. And so that kind of leads me to my next question. You talked a lot about, getting on the same page, and I hear that a lot when it comes to people combining households, getting married, or maybe even possibly living together. So, what happens in that part of the conversation? Like, what kind of conversations are had to get to that point where people feel comfortable to start getting on the same page?
To be perfectly honest, there's no perfect way to do it, but just to do it. Like we had to be like jump all in, both feet in. And it was important that in the beginning of our marriage, we talked about certain goals and dreams that we had. And a lot of those goals, involve money. So in order for us to do some of those goals, we knew that we had to come together, sit down once a month, and let's set a budget. As Tyler mentioned, we were both totally different when it came to handling our money. So Tyler wasn't used to setting a budget or having any boundaries when it came to money. And me, on the other hand, I was. So that was a little tricky, sitting down and coming together and let's just hash it out. It's very, very important that when you and your spouse, when you come together, it's important that both parties have a voice. Both parties have an opinion. No one person is right over the other. And it's going to be a trial and error period. And just with time, it gets better.
Yeah, don't make the mistake of thinking that you can just sit down and have one conversation about finances and things just kind of fall into place. It's going to be many conversations. It's going to be many coming back to the table over and over again, maybe even hashing out the same topic before you get to the place to where you guys are on the same page. We want to make sure that you and everybody listening understands that it's going to be time involved in this. I mean, just like any other part of your marriage, you're going to have to put in time and effort in order to get to the place that you want to be.
Absolutely. And I think that's a very strong point to make. I think a lot of the times, um, and I think we've all maybe been guilty at some point where we get that advice from someone and that person says, well, you just got to have a talk. And
Right.
it's easy to think that
Right.
one talk, and I'm glad to hear you to say that it's not just one talk. It's going to be many
Mhm.
talks, and maybe another one. It might be more than you're thinking, but it's going to have to continuously be communication about the
Absolutely.
situation.
And
Yeah.
believe it or not, sometimes it's not even talking, it's actions. It's like, what are you doing to, contribute to the household and to our goals and to our commitment, what we committed to? That's very, very important. Like, actions speak louder than words. It was one thing for Talent to tell me, I'm ready to change. I'm tired of handling money the way that I used to. But it was another thing when I actually saw him in action. I saw him being diligent with his money. I saw him not being wasteful and being resourceful. I saw him sitting down, wanting to take ownership. So that's important as well too.
I think to your earlier question, how do you do this? I think that, like Ty mentioned earlier, when you sit down and you dream together and you set goals together, that kind of becomes your center. That kind of becomes your springboard. So for me, being the one that had the bad spending habits, when I was tempted to kind of go back and be reckless again and not, adhere to what our new plan was, I had something to fall back on and think about. Man, we're trying to get to this point and to this destination. So it's really important for couples to figure out the why. Why do we need to get on one accord financially? Why do we need to set a budget? Why do we need to watch our spending habits? When you set that goal, that why, it makes those conversations, even in tough times, you're able to overcome and get back on the same page because you both have a reference point to go back to.
Absolutely. And believe it or not, even earlier on in our marriage, I didn't have to do a lot of talking because you knew the why. So that's so important. I definitely agree with that. It's important that both parties know the why, because then you don't really have to do a lot of talking. You don't have to say, well, remember we talked about this. Well, you already know the why. So now, you're doing what you need to do to make it happen.
So making a plan together and having that foundation is really important in order to move forward and to make sure that
Absolutely.
you have something to look back at. Well, that's a really good point. And so let's take it back a little bit. I'm gonna set this up. I'm a young person out there. I'm thinking about settling down, and I guess maybe I found that one person. Okay, what would a couple do if they aren't quite there yet in their relationship, of they haven't made any solid decisions as far as marriage, or as far as maybe even moving in together, but they're getting there? What are some of the do's or some of the things that they can do, before it starts to get, become a problem or become a tension area in their relationship?
Well, I think it starts with smaller conversations. I mean, you can talk about, I mean, you can be at a restaurant and you can notice spending habits there. Do they always order the steak and the lobster
Right.
and always pulling out their credit card? You can
Right.
notice if somebody has a tendency to always be putting things on credit.
Hmm.
Those things can lead to conversations about credit,
Hmm.
about credit scores, about how much debt that you have. If you all are in college, you all can be talking about, well, student loans, or what are your plans after we graduate? How do you see yourself 5 years from now? I think it starts with having more general, big conversations as opposed to specific targeted things, but just having big, general, personal finance
Hmm.
conversations can kind of begin to give you indications about each other's money styles and about each other's money habits, and it'll help you make decisions as to, is this, do I want to proceed, or is this a
Hmm.
caution? Is this a red flag? Should I pull back a little bit? I just think that talking about money doesn't have to be, spreadsheets and calculators all the time. It can just be you looking at life in general, and it could be something you're watching on TV, and you could say, "Well, what do you think about that, man? It seemed like they always got the newest cars. And
Mhm.
man, I wonder what kind of car note comes with that type of car. And you can be having a conversation about how you all view debt, car payments, and just using life and having big general conversations about finance can lead to more specific and targeted ones.
And I would also say do a self evaluation as well too. You don't necessarily always have to like talk to your significant other, especially if marriage is not in the horizon right now. But I would say, what can you do to better your financial situation? Are you getting out of debt? How are you handling your money? One thing that I did before we even got married, I read as much as I could on finances. I watched as many shows as I could on finances. I dug deep into financial matters because I knew what I wanted my future to be like financially. So when Tal and I did start having a conversation of, okay, well, maybe we should be, having that marriage talk. Maybe we should be walking down the aisle. It was easier to then, discuss some of the things that I read or some of the things that I watched, or even in your case, listen to podcasts, different podcast shows. Fill yourself up with as much information as possible financially, so you can be better prepared when it is time to jump the broom.
That's awesome. And it sounds like the more prepared that each individual is, the better it will be to have these conversations, and the easier it will be. Because I could see it maybe being a little intimidating to a person if you have one person that's super educated about it and the other person isn't. It might turn into a defense mechanism. But if you both start to educate yourself early, then it's just an exchange of information versus one person's on the defense because they feel like the person knows more. That sounds like a really good idea.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're listening to this show, Valentine's Day is around the corner. Y'all need to swap money books. Get your honey something related to money if you want to make sure not to have these issues. Okay. So we talked about the do's, and you guys gave us a little bit, kind of some insight on what you could do beforehand. What are some of those, and Talat, he kind of touched on a little bit. What are some clear red flags? What do you think that, if somebody is beginning in a relationship, or, maybe in a relationship and they're thinking about moving forward, what are some things that you think are just complete red flags, and, maybe it's time for you to rethink the situation?
Well, me personally, I'm an optimist, and I got to tell you, I always think that there's hope, there's a chance, there's a possibility. But with that in mind, there are some red flags.
Absolutely.
You can see if somebody is just completely, I think it comes down to their heart. You can be bad with money, as I was,
right,
and have a good heart and have a willing heart to learn and to do better. On the other hand, you can be reckless with money and really have a nonchalant attitude about it, and really not receptive to change, not receptive to doing better. If you come across somebody who is both terrible with money presently and you don't even see a willingness to do better, I mean, that might be a red flag for you to look out for. If you see that they're involved in even light gambling, maybe they just play poker with their buddies, you might want to, look out, because, I mean, in Ty's experience in working in financial services, she's seen where gambling addiction grew and tore families apart, But don't just base your decision on data and the numbers, because if we did that, we wouldn't be sitting here on this interview right now, because all the data and all the numbers said Ty should have probably ran the other way.
Well, I'm going to tell you what would have been a red flag for me. If you would have came to me and you would have said, what, Ty, I need some money. Like, I'm like, what? You need some money, more money? Like what? Or maybe I would like you to co-sign for me on a vehicle.
No.
That would have been a red flag to me.
No.
Like, no, I think that he's having some money issues. Maybe I need to step back a little bit. If you were always interested in my money and what I have to offer, what I have to give to you, then that would have been a red flag to me.
I think we should say that again. If somebody comes to you for a co-signature,
don't do it.
Run.
Put your Nikes on and run.
That's it. I would like you to put your name on this lease, because I need an apartment. No, I would not suggest doing those things.
Open this business with me with your credit. I'll put the money down, but let's use your credit. Red flag.
We're gonna get married. In a couple of years. I want to marry you. Like, if your intuition is telling you all, like, hey, maybe you need to slow it down, maybe you need to, go the other way, then by all means listen. For us, that's the Holy Spirit. We believe in Jesus Christ. So for me, like, God, I did a lot of praying, a lot of praying, and a lot of soul seeking. And if God would have spoken to me and told me, you know what, slow down, I would have taken heed to that.
And I think on the other side, for the guys that are listening, if you see a young lady who's quick to swipe and spend,
Mm-hmm.
but she can't keep a job and she really doesn't really have any type of personal financial awareness, I mean, that might be a red flag for you because that could end up in
Yeah.
your name, all
Mm-hmm.
that debt, and she could bring those bad money habits into the marriage
Mm-hmm.
and cause a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety for you. So again, search the heart, look
Right.
deep, look to the interior, look to the core of this person when it comes to their personal finances.
Absolutely. That sounds like the key to probably anything: finances, love, everything, business partners. It really is about the person's heart, and if they have the willingness, if they're open minded to change. So that brings me to a question that's a little bit related to this. I mean, I feel like today we're living in this time where, people aren't necessarily rushing down the altar to get married, the aisle to get married. But they are living this a married lifestyle. Maybe they're living with each other beforehand. It's a great area right now because there are legalities in getting married, and then, having your significant other move in with you. You kind of, those legalities are faded away. So my question to the two of you is, and I don't know if both of you have different opinions on this, but do you think that a couple or each individual in a relationship should be financially fit before they decide to join households?
No, I don't think that has to be the case. That's
Right.
ideal.
Right.
That'd be great, but no, that doesn't have to be the case at all because the Ty and I, as you mentioned earlier, we're Christians, so we believe that God puts two imperfect people together in marriage, and He puts them together so that they can bring out the best in each other, so that they can complete each other. So it's not so much that you got to wait for that perfect person to come because guess what? Nobody's
They
perfect.
would never come.
You're not perfect. So why are you waiting on somebody perfect to marry?
Mm-hmm.
The point is, again, like we just said, you look to that person's heart because Ty and I are a prime example of one person having it together when it came to their finances and the other being clueless. But through marriage, through love, that's what the marriage should be about. Through that, we were able to come together and kind of figure this thing out and put the pieces together.
Wow, that's beautiful.
It's true, though.
It's true, and it's just, it spoke to your last point as well. It's in the person's heart. It's all about the heart. It's all about what you're willing to do, and that's with anything. If you have that willpower, and you really put your mind into it, and you say, you know what, I know I'm not perfect, but I want to reach this goal. It'll happen. And hopefully, people listening to this show, if you are with someone who maybe is not, the best with their finances, that have that patience with them, educate yourself and help them to educate themselves, and I'm pretty sure it'll work itself out. And oh yeah, listen to the His and Her Money podcast. I think that'll
That's
help you
right.
out too.
And I think it's important to note that it's not going to be overnight. And like you just said, it's going to require patience. The point is, do you see progress? Maybe they're not where they should be today. And it's not just really about talk, like Ty mentioned earlier. Do you see any type of change? Do you see any type of willingness to change? Do you see them, going in the right direction? Maybe they haven't gotten to the finish line, but are they headed there? You should be able to see some type of progress or at least some softening of their heart, some openness to hear what you have to say. If you see that, and even though they're not perfect right now, then you should proceed.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Ty, let me ask you this. Um, what do you think are some some action items for people today listening to this show? I mean, I get the sense that you might be one of the kind of people that like the checklist, and you got,
Oh yeah.
yeah, you seem like you kind of like got to check that box, and that's really what I'm looking for. What are some of these things? I listen to this show, and I'm thinking about my significant other, and I want to start today. What are some action items that I can do?
Well, I'm going to tell you what I did. I didn't get it all right. I thought I had, my list checked and thought I had it checked twice, and then I discovered that Talent, he had a little bit more debt than he alluded to. However, though, one of the major things that I did, or that we did, was when we started having the marriage talk, and before we walked down that aisle, we had premarital counseling with our pastor. And that was so important in many ways. One of the topics that we touched on was finances. How do we see finances in our married couple? Do we see us joining our finances? Like, there were some tough questions. There were some questions asked during our premarital counseling that, we had to answer. And I wanted to know his answer. After we left our counseling session, we also pulled our credit report. You can get a free copy of your credit report at annualcreditreport.com from all three credit bureaus. That was so important to me. It was not important just for Talent to tell me who he owed, or for me to tell him how, what was on my credit report, but it was important that both he and I sat down with both of our credit reports and we reviewed them together. Like, that was so important. That was key, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And along with that, you want to sit down together and set a budget.
Absolutely. That's right. So that was another thing that we did too. We sat down. We didn't really quite sit down before we got married to, have our budget detailed, to the fullest. However, another important thing too for us was to know how much each other was getting paid, bringing home. Because we believe that when you get married, that it's no more his money and her money, but it is now our money. So we knew that we wanted to join accounts and join our finances. This was now a household of one. However, we know nowadays employers can set up, you can set up separate allotments where you can have money taken out of your paycheck and sent to another account. And so many married couples do that without the spouse even knowing that they have extra money going somewhere else. So that was also important to us as well too, that we reviewed our pay stubs, and it was just building trust. It wasn't that we didn't necessarily have doubt in each other. We just wanted to make each other feel comfortable. We wanted to lay that foundation off. Yeah, we wanted to lay that foundation in the beginning of our marriage, of being transparent and keeping open lines of communication.
And that's interesting that you mentioned that, Ty, because I've had plenty of conversations with people every day, and that is really a mixed thoughts on the whole, should we have a joint account? Should our accounts be together? And it was funny, I even heard someone say the other day, she was talking about her husband, and this was actually a speaker, so she was being funny about it, but the whole crowd laughed, and she was talking about her husband. They had gotten to some kind of financial bind, and she said, I had to go get the money, and then she said, ladies, you know what I'm talking about, that stash, you got to keep that stash. And so it was funny, but there was a lot of relief laughter in the audience, because I think a lot of people can relate to the fact that
Absolutely.
People have money stashed away because, for whatever reason,
in case, right. Absolutely.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that there's not as much transparency in relationships when it comes to money?
I think it has to do with fear. I also think it probably has to do with personal experience, maybe someone that they knew close to them. It could have even been a parent that went through a bad divorce, and that parent was left without anything, and they had to see that parent struggle to try to, put food on the table. Before I got married, I can't tell you how many people, some of my clients would come and say, oh, you better make sure you have your side money, girl, because you just never know. And for a minute there, I had to, think, and I'm like, okay, do I want to do this, or do I just want to trust God? Like I said, my relationship with God is very strong. And even then, I had to put my trust in God and not man, because man's going to fail you every time. So, okay, Lord, I'm going to trust you. I'm not going to go into this marriage already with the idea of there's a possibility that we may get divorced. I'm going to go into this marriage that we will, last forever, and that this marriage will be strong forever. We may have our ups and downs, but we're going to make it. So that's what I chose to do. But I do know that there are some people who choose, to have separate accounts. And like I said, sometimes I think it stems from personal experience or they've heard other people's experience, maybe not necessarily close to them, but other people that didn't do so well in their marriage.
And
Interesting.
I
So,
gotta wonder, I gotta wonder how healthy that is.
Right.
I gotta wonder what else is hidden, what else is
So
stashed
true.
away besides dollar bills. For us, it was never a question. It was gonna be all of our money together. We were gonna go through life together. We were gonna do everything together. When we decided to get married, we decided that we were gonna spend our life together. It was no longer about an individual independence. It was about codependence and depending on each other. I think that's what the essence of marriage is. It's two people coming together in holy matrimony before God saying that this is forever. Now, of course, some marriages do fall apart, but I find it difficult. I find it troubling that people come into the
Right.
marriage thinking about the end of it.
interesting perspective. I know, that is definitely one way to think about it, and I think you guys really hit it when you talked about the transparency and the trust, because I don't know if you can have trust without transparency. I think those things just are, they're they're coupled and they go together. So I think the bigger issue is like you already mentioned, is, do you trust this person, and are you going to be completely open and honest? And if the answer is yes, then I guess there's no need for that stash money.
Right. No.
Well, we're kind of coming up on the close of the interview, which kind of makes me sad because I really could talk to you guys all night about this. But I have a part of my show where I like to ask people if they knew um, then what they know now. What would they do different, or what would you tell yourself, 10 years ago about pretty much anything? I mean, it doesn't have to be specific to money, but you guys could have your separate answers if you want to.
Well, for me, I mean, it would definitely be on the financial side because I made so much money and just blew it all. Just I had no reason to be so deep in debt, but it was just really a ignorance when it came to personal finance. So I would tell my younger self to learn about money. Don't just see what other people are doing and try to keep up with the Joneses. Just because somebody else has a car with the rims, why do I need that? And why do I need bigger and better? I think that I spent a lot of time trying to keep up appearances, and really it was to my detriment. And I really dug a hole that took quite a while and quite a lot of effort to undo. So I would tell my younger self to be smart with your money. I mean, it's gonna come back. You're not gonna be 22, 25 forever. Like, you have a future. One day you're gonna be married. One day you're gonna have children, and you want to be in a better place financially to give yourself a good head start instead of giving yourself a hole to dig yourself out of financially.
And I would tell myself that with man, things are impossible, but with God, all things are possible. I would have told, back then, I had a little fear when I first discovered Alice's financial state. And it was a fear of the unknown. And I would just tell myself, just trust God, trust me, it's going to get better and you're going to love it in the end.
Wow, that's great. Well, I absolutely appreciate you coming on the show. You guys don't even know. I know we talked about this a little bit before the call, but I'm like really excited about this. Not only because you guys have an awesome show, but also just because money is just one of those things that's always going to be relevant to couples. It's just, or to young professionals and to anybody. So this is something that I think that people are going to really be able to sink their teeth into once they listen to it. I know where to find you guys, but tell everybody where they can find you, how they can get in touch with you if they want to know more about what it is that you guys have to offer.
You can visit us over at our website at hisandhermoney.com. We're also on social media. We're at Facebook and Instagram and Twitter at His and Her Money. We're also on Pinterest. We also have a YouTube channel with over 50 videos of information and counting, right? And of information, and just go to youtube.com/His and Her Money. We also have a 21-day financial transformation video series over there, totally free. We'll show you how to transform your finances in just 21 days. So they're short, doable videos, all under 5 minutes. and we give you an action, and you just go for it, and you can change your financial life.
And we're on iTunes. Just
That's right.
Search for the His and Her Money Show. We have a bunch of debt-free stories to inspire you, to show you that you can live a debt-free life. There are people all across the country that are doing it. And it's not people that have 6 and 7 figure salaries. It's people with average American incomes who are putting in work to live the real American dream, which is to be debt-free.
That's it.
Wow, it sounds like a wealth of resources. So if you're listening to this show right now, cuddle up with your honey on Valentine's Day and start talking about that money. Go to hisandhermoney.com and get those resources and try to get ahead of the game when it comes to your money. Talaat Tai, I want to thank you guys for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. We had fun.
This was awesome. Thanks.
You can find all the links and resources mentioned in this podcast in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this podcast, head over to thesavvyYP.com for more career, business, and life tips. Keep it savvy, YPs.